I'd like to introduce to you your moderator, Jeremy Jacob, who's an engineer, a board member at CAMCD, and partner at the Village Dispensary, an all-around awesome guy. After spending 15 years in renewable energy, Jeremy entered the cannabis space to sink his teeth into a green industry where innovation and social justice are key. Jeremy recognized the opportunities that the end of Prohibition presented, and set out to ensure that these opportunities were available to middle-class Canadians. As an engineer, a board member of CAMCD, C-A-M-C-D, sorry, that's what we call it here, and a partner in the Village Dispensary, Jeremy finds himself navigating the uncharted waters of legalization and is excited about what the future holds. Please welcome Jeremy Jacobs and his esteemed panel.
Thank you, Dee, and thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank my panel here. We have A.C. Braddock from Eden Labs. A.C. is beside me here. We have Martin Lee from Project CBD, and we have Travis Lane from the Internet Dispensary. And I'd like to take a few minutes, or give each of our panelists a few minutes to introduce themselves. A.C., please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming today. I am the CEO of Eden Labs. We make extraction and distillation equipment for multiple industries for 21 years. And we have always been very active in the cannabis industry. I think our founder was the first person in the States to extract cannabis with CO2. And I think he was the first one to advertise an extraction system in High Times in like 1994. But we are very active politically in the States, and we look forward to meeting all of you guys and hopefully doing.
I'm Martin Lee, co-director, or I should say co-founder and director of Project CBD and author of Smoke Signals. And Project CBD, maybe the name doesn't quite get at it at all, but we focus not just on CBD, but on all the components of the cannabis plant, the synergies between them. And we also emphasize the synergies between cannabis as a medicinal herb and the whole pantheon of other medicinal herbs. And we recognize in terms of healing and health that has much to do with environmental health. You can't separate it. So we focus not just on cannabinoids and receptors and all those things, but on the relationship between the person and their environment. And of course, that means emphasizing sustainable methods and organic methods as a practice.
I'm Travis Lane. I'm the CEO and founder of the Internet Dispensary. I'm pretty much a lifelong cannabis professional. I started growing cannabis while I was still in my teens. My parents were hippies from the 60s who used cannabis, so I never faced any real stigma internally or growing up. Gradually through trial and error, I started with some of the worst possible growing methods, and over the years I've come to be completely organic, pesticide-free. Also, I very much believe that the small farmer and the small grower that is present here in BC and has been present here in BC for a very, very long time should make up the core of the future cannabis industry if we want high-quality, organic, clean medication getting to the populace.
Okay, well, thank you. We've got a great panel, and I hope we have a great discussion, and hope you enjoy it. I'm going to throw the first question out to AC. How does Eden Labs reduce its carbon footprint?
So Eden Labs was founded by an environmentalist, a science writer and an environmentalist. He was a part of Rainforest Action Group, Earth First, and Greenpeace. And so it has always been a part of the mission of the company. And as far as just in how we design our systems, for instance, we use a distillation principle in how the extraction process happens in CO2 is instead of relying on pumps and compressors, our systems only use like a 5 horsepower compressor compared to a lot of other companies that are 20, 25 horsepower compressors. So even in the engineering, the design of our systems, in workplace safety, we purposely put there's so many different ways you can reduce your carbon footprint. The location of our business is next to the airport. So, and we're in city. So our employees don't have far to travel. We have never paid anybody less than $15 an hour because because our employees live in Seattle. It's very expensive, and we're happy to pay them to live locally so that, it drastically reduces their travel time. All of our manufacturing is in Washington. It's all local. We recycle everything. We have, we regulate the temperature in our facility. We also contribute to a local group called Stewardship Partners, and they teach local farmers how to farm organically. We message farming organically to our processors that we sell to. There's just so many tiny little ways that you can help reduce your carbon footprint, but those are a few ways that we do it.
Well, that's comprehensive and holistic, so that's good to hear. The local travel is a huge one, and paying above the standard wage is also a huge one. Next question I'm going to put out to Travis. So Travis, in indoor growing, what are the biggest environmental impacts, and how has your growing technique evolved to mitigate those impacts?
Well, I think when you look at it, the biggest environmental impacts for indoor growing are power consumption, fertilizer use, and pesticides. They're also the most costly ones. And so when you start looking at what's going to happen under legalization, and you start looking at other cash crops that are grown around the world, none of them are grown inside. Cannabis is the only cash crop in the world that's grown inside en masse. So once legalization happens, there's no logical reason to stay inside. So what we're going to see is we're going to step outside, we're going to start growing under the sun, we're going to eliminate some of that power footprint. One of the biggest problems we're going to face is taking container garden fertilizer outside. And this is something that needs to be avoided, in my opinion. Container garden fertilizer is generally chelated metal nutrients and salt-based nutrients that are held in suspension in water. Those salts desiccate the bacteria and the fungus that live in the soil naturally. So in a container, it's not that big of a deal in some ways for final production because you're throwing away your medium at the end of your crop and you're starting with fresh medium. The fact that it's dead and full of salt doesn't matter. The instant we're planting plants into our actual soil outside, if we continue to use methods like this, we're going to see that we're going to start to kill some of the microlife in the soil, and that can have drastic impacts. You can see it in the United States already. A new study came out last year that 5% of the arable land in the United States has been lost to chelated nutrients and salt-based nutrients. It's something similar that happened in the Dust Bowl earlier in the 19th century, or I guess the late 19th century. And so it's something that we can't take this whole industry that's all inside and move it outside and use the same methods. We need to start using the more organic methods, the more traditional agricultural methods of using the soil for sustenance. No one's out there feeding the forest, so let's make sure that we understand that nature does this for us and have at least try and not destroy the outdoor environment that we step into right away.
Yeah, those are totally valid. One thing I wanted to ask you about as well, I'm aware of some cooling systems in indoor grow ops that are using municipal water through water source heat pumps and just dumping to drain. Yep. What are your thoughts on water consumption there?
Well, I think, again, when we move outside, like personally in our greenhouse setup, we're going to set up rainwater catchers and stuff like that. The nice thing about being outside, too, is that there's a water table underneath the soil you're using. Like, this isn't a fixed container area. So when you're watering into the soil, a lot of the time you have to water a lot less, which lessens your water necessities. You can recycle all that water out of your cooling system, plus collect rainwater. In the end, you could be pretty much completely off city water in a greenhouse in BC. I mean, we live in a rainforest. It rains quite a bit around here. We could be using that water quite easily for free. and have very little impact. I know one of the things that governments are concerned about with the booming craft beer is water use. And they're starting to charge more and more for water. And it's like the reclamation of rainwater in order to garden is just common sense to me. It just falls from the sky, literally.
Yeah, nice. Well, that's definitely a resource that we need to take better advantage of out here. Martin, I wanted to ask you a little bit about environmental factors, maybe in indoor growing or in, environmental additives perhaps that have an effect on our finished products.
A key question, because it's unfortunately quite prevalent, pesticides and toxins in the cannabis supply. And in Denver, they've had over 20 recalls since legalization, mainly because of pesticide contamination. In California, there's not a lot of testing of what's going on in that regard. The industry is, or we call now the industry, you used to call it a community, but it's forced to rely on its own devices to test itself. So Jeff Raber from the workshop in Pasadena, which unfortunately closed down about a year ago in a police raid, he's a serious scientist, and they did a study, a sample of 57 cannabis oil concentrates, dabbing, what you'd use to dab and so forth. And 80% were shown to be tainted by pesticide and solvent residues. In Washington State, it's even shockingly worse. There was just a presentation about 10 days ago at the International Cannabinoid Research Society conference on pesticide levels in cannabis in Washington. Just to read a little bit of the results of that is very disturbing. This was presented by Dr. Ethan Russo at the conference. His name has come up earlier. Very well-respected scientist, and he was speaking about pesticide contamination. And they looked at 26 samples in Washington State. 22 tested positive for pesticides. These included 45 distinct agents of every class of pesticide: insecticides, miticides, fungicides, synergists and growth regulators, organophosphates, organochlorides. So you're talking about really gnarly stuff. And then one particular extract that was actually supposedly destined for the medical market, such as it used to be in Washington, had 9 different pesticides, including very high levels. I won't even read all the scientific names, but they included carcinogens, neurotoxins, cholinesterase inhibitors, that's like nerve gas, developmental and reproductive toxins, and endocrine disruptors. This is just on one sample, all those things. Now, I don't know how representative this test, this sampling of 26 samples is of the entire market, but the fact that they can randomly choose these samples and come up with these results is very, very disturbing, and it raises some serious questions about the industry such as it is and where it's headed. And one can talk more about this, but this is a real serious problem that we have to confront, because when you're talking about medical cannabis in particular, and that's our focus at Project CBD, cannabis therapeutics rests on access to good quality medicine. So and immunocompromised people are obviously more vulnerable to the kind of toxins that we just described.
I just want to say, sometimes we get asked this a question a lot as far as extractions go, and that is, does the extraction process remove pesticides? Or does the extraction process remove molds? And the extraction process is actually a concentration process. Yeah. So it is concentrating what's there. So again, that's why we encourage people to go organic for all the reasons that Martin just mentioned.
I just mentioned something about organic because it's relevant in this case. Really quickly, there's no organic standards for testing cannabis in the United States because it's federally against the law. So they can't even use the Department of Agriculture organic standards such as they are, because that association can't exist. But organic growers are actually even more disadvantaged in this marketplace, because organic growers are more likely to use beneficial microbes to attack what you don't want, the pests you don't want. And beneficial microbes oftentimes will turn up as a false positive in a microbe test. And generally, most states that involve with medical marijuana do mandate microbial tests. I mean, the state laws are all over the map. They're all different, but most generally mandate that. So if you're an organic grower and you're doing the right thing by using a good pest, or we don't call it a pest, but a good bug to battle a noxious bug, because of the way these things are tested, it's difficult to differentiate when you're dealing with culturing like fungus, for example, which tends to encourage bacterial growth. Well, what's really turning up in your test? Is it just the bacteria that happens to be growing there? Is it the good stuff they used or what? So false positives are very common, and then this drives more pesticide use. Because you get a well, then you got to use something stronger to get rid of it, even though it's not even there. So it's real problems that we're facing in this industry in that regard.
That is a real problem with no easy answers, it seems.
Testing.
Testing. Well, we'll get, did you have a comment?
Well, I mean, I think another part of it is just being aware of bioaccumulation in general, especially once we go outdoors. Some of these things, like, you look at the old DDT thing, where DDE is still in people's systems today that were born after DDT was banned. A lot of the pesticides and a lot of these nutrients that use EDTA as a chelator will get dumped into the environment, and we don't know what's going to happen. They're not going to disappear. We haven't done the testing long term to know what their impact is going to be, but we do know that microbes eat them, microbes get eaten by something else, and it passes from species to species to species until it can have a larger impact. And the fact that we don't know what that potential impact is should frighten us away from using these things. You know, it could be disastrous. We're talking about our entire ecological structure here.
Okay, well, yeah, there's a lot more to this than I think many of us realize.
And of course, it applies to all agriculture. Like, this is at its core an agricultural product. This is something that is grown in the dirt, and it's a plant. And so we face the same problems as the agricultural businesses in general do. We just have distinct ones because of the emergence of an illicit market.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on here. Though that one point, I think there's a lot of comments I'd like to throw back, but I know we have a time constraint here. For AC, in your opinion, do we have a responsibility or an onus to make decisions that consider the environment as we're growing out our business? And how maybe has that impacted some of the decisions you've made at Eden Labs?
We absolutely have a responsibility. In a broader picture, it's just creating a business model that is socially responsible, or corporate social responsibility, and that, of course, encompasses your employees, your community, the environment. Those are the things that define what corporate responsibility is. And when you're developing a new industry, and we're starting from scratch on regulations, you know, we're sailing this ship and building it while we're doing it. And if we're going to be doing that, then we should be self-regulating. We should be starting this whole industry off on the absolute right foot, because we're under a spotlight. And like you just said, as far as this is an ag product, but they like to treat it like it's something that just plopped down here from outer space and requires all these special rules or regulations, and it's a plant. So as long as we continue to look at it that way and make sure that the spotlight that's being put on us also then is a whole social change, a cultural change that goes across all of human consumables, all pesticide use, Monsanto, GMOs, diversity, supporting women in business, all of it is what this industry can do, which is pretty huge. I mean, this is a generational opportunity for any business owner. And to be able to come in and have no rules and do it the right way from the get-go is so exciting. And yeah, fully on board, totally responsible.
It is an opportunity, and I think that we need to all think about how we're going to take advantage of this and set those standards so high that we're beyond reproach as an industry. And I guess it's also got to be balanced with having a viable business. So that's
it's a marketing tool too.
Yeah.
It is a marketing tool. Doing the right thing is a marketing tool.
And we save money by growing organically. Like, I produce more cannabis cheaper now than I ever have in my life. And as the technology outdoors and the genetic adjust back to going outdoors, I use aloe and water. That's my entire fertilizing program. You know, it's like it's cheaper, it's better, and it will allow, which the medical panel spoke to, it'll allow for there to be a segment of the population that gets it much, much cheaper, which will make it more likely for healthcare programs to subsidize it. The cheaper we can get our production costs, you can still have a viable business with a lower end retail price. And you can almost keep the same margins by going with this cheaper method of production.
Okay. So Travis, this one's for you. Where do you see the future of growing? Where do the biggest challenges come from? Do environmental strategies provide solutions, or do the solutions result in environmental gains?
Well, I mean, right now, I think if you take government and legality out of the equation, absolutely, the logical solutions are also the best business solutions. They're also the best solutions for public consumption and safety of product. The biggest hurdle is the government. Once legalization does come full on and they remove it from the CDSA, are they going to restrict method? And if they restrict method and make it non-agricultural, like right now, they make people grow indoors. The legal system demands that people put a structure out there. And when you look at that and you go, okay, you've got to build on ag land, but you've got to build a building to grow in and use hydroelectric or nuclear power or whatever in order to do it, that doesn't make sense. Business-wise, as a businessman, I want to lower my cost of production. And publicly, the purchaser, the end user, wants a cheaper product with lots of variety. Both of those things lead me to believe that we should be treating it absolutely like an agricultural product with a craft side to it for that variety.
I want to throw another question at you right now. This wasn't on our schedule, but I've heard from some that organically grown or not, after proper flushing, there's no difference between the finished product. What are your thoughts on that?
So the actual nutrients the plant takes up, whether they take it up from a liquid nutrient or from the soil food web of a living soil, the actual elements that they take up are the same. It's just delivery method that's the question. And I mean, you can grow amazing cannabis in a wide range of fashions. Like it's not like organic's the only way. The thing is, those delivery methods that we use for liquid fertilizers are hazardous to the environment, more expensive. So regardless of the quality of the final product, if it's comparable, it makes no sense to go with the hazardous, expensive option as opposed to the safer and cheaper option, whether you're a businessman, an environmentalist, or you're just an end user. It's like none of it makes sense because that cost gets passed on everywhere down the line to the end user as well.
Okay. Thanks, Travis. Next question for Martin. I wanted to ask if you can share with us a case study or an example of a synergy between a renewable and this industry.
I could, and I want to comment on something that's been said.
Please do.
You know, when we talk about these sustainable agriculture, and there are obviously methods that will apply to all kinds of crops, not just cannabis, integrated pest management without the use of pesticides, companion planting, all the things that are just sensible to do that have been done for time immemorial practically. But what is actually going on when we're doing that? You know, the plants send signals to each other when in times of stress, or if they send signals to insects. And all we're doing when we talk about these techniques of integrated pest management is just simply augmenting, maybe facilitating or helping a little bit what the plants are already doing. If they're being attacked by a predator, they send out a smell to either attract another predator that will eat that predator, or something that'll keep the predator away. And it turns out that those signaling molecules for human beings do some very similar things. For plants, they send out a signal during stress, and those same molecules, those terpenes, help us with stress. So there's a real interesting connection there, even though I think human beings are beside the point, the plants communicating with interest. Anyway, I think all these kind of techniques we talk about, biodynamics and permaculture, integrated pest management, and these kind of things, there is a place in California that Project CBD is now partnered with called the Solar Living Center. This is to answer your question quickly. In Hopland, California. It's the first little town in the Emerald Triangle, the cannabis breadbasket of Northern California. And it's great because it's a green technology wonderland, you might say. It's off the grid entirely. All the buildings are green buildings built with hemp or hemp or other products. And people come from around the world to study the agricultural techniques. And about a year and a half ago, the Solar Living Center reached out to Project CBD and said, we want to have a CBD-oriented dispensary, a medical marijuana dispensary, as part of the situation there, knowing full well that when it becomes legal in California, maybe as early as November, this will be a place where people will stop and look at, to come to see what medical marijuana really was all about in California, or what the best of it. And indeed, we have a dispensary now. They're called Emerald Farms. It's not a CBD-only dispensary. It has CBD, THC, all the different products. But it's a beautiful spot and a stunning landscape with ponds and all kinds of gardens that you can imagine. Children's gardens, a lavender labyrinth, and just, it's a wonderful synergy, and it's how we want to put forward to the rest of the world to make a statement about what has been happening in California for the past 20 years. And that, to me, struck me as an ideal way of making that statement. And furthermore, just one little historical tidbit. It turns out that the whole solar energy industry in California started in this same location. Pot growers, people from the 60s, social radicals, the Back to the Land movement that went up the country from the Bay Area, settled in communes and so forth, and started businesses. And one of them was a solar panel business, the first of its kind, retail in North America, as far as I know. But the only people that could afford the solar panels at that time were the pot growers. And they really needed it because they needed to live off the grid. So there was an amazing synergy between what the fledgling solar power industry in the United States and the cannabis industry. They grew up together in the really the heart and soul of where cannabis is in the United States, in the Emerald Triangle. So that's that.
Okay.
And along some of those same lines, especially with the challenges that the cannabis industry is having in California regarding to water, it's a massive issue. And that's something else that we're working on as a company, and that is doing another extraction of water out of the air to be able to be reused. And we're trying to do that with using solar power as well. We're working on a system for that.
Yeah, water's huge. We have a couple more minutes, so I wanted to ask a quick question of you, AC, in a second. Okay, so I wanted to ask a quick question. We have another minute here so we know CO2 extractions are environmentally sound relative to BHO extractions. Cost is significantly higher. How do we justify the adoption of a clean technology when, you know, the market is driving margins and people are looking for, you know, affordable extraction equipment? How do you see that business case working out for CO2 extractors?
So it's been already readily proven by the hops industry that if you start doing extractions of that type of plant on a large scale, that CO2 is by far the most efficient way to do it. And I hear a lot of, I guess you're asking me about the difference between light hydrocarbons and CO2, or?
Well, we talked a little bit about having a fireproof enclosure, the insurance implications. Yeah. So
sometimes we hear a lot about how inexpensive it is to get into doing light hydrocarbons, particularly BHO. But it is an easy entry, and the systems themselves are pretty inexpensive. There's not a whole lot of, I mean, you're not phase-changing gases and things like that inside of a system too much. Some of them are really great systems. But when it comes to regulation or self-regulation, what we could see as a company, because we make hydrocarbon systems, we make butane systems, we make propane system, R134, all kinds of different solvents for all kinds of different industries. But what we could see happening back in 2007 in this industry was that those systems were kind of an Achilles heel. So we as a company chose not to sell them. We probably lost millions of dollars not selling light hydrocarbon systems to this industry, but we created a path that was easy for the industry to go down. And as far as the costs go, yes, the CO2 system is more expensive, but you also have to look at having an explosion-proof room, an explosion-proof building, and the cost of that, which you don't have to have with a CO2 system because it's non-flammable and non-explosive. Then there's HVAC issues in the room because it's a non-toxic. I mean, you can asphyxiate if your room gets full of CO2, but it's obviously not as. I mean, we are also we also followed California's solvent, so God, what was it called? Followed a rule, there was the solvent emission rules back in 2006 that we followed with our distillers to create we engineered our system so that there was no vapor that escaped even after you opened it. But going back to the differences between light hydrocarbons and CO2, then there's also the post-processing system that they don't usually mention. With CO2, the post-processing is pretty simple. The solvent is non-toxic. With light hydrocarbons, it sometimes can take days to get all of the solvent back out. And that is extremely energy inefficient and cost and just your time. So the CO2 can take a day and other ones can take several.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of different mechanisms in costing things out.
And I think that's where, if you're self-regulating to a high standard and you're considering all those things, it makes it much easier to talk yourself into the CO2 extraction equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's it for our time up here, but we wanted to open the floor. We have 5 minutes for questions today. So here's the mic. And please do keep your questions concise, and we'll try to keep our answers concise.
This is a question for, I think, Martin Lee. And it basically came out of your comments that in Washington State there was a study by, you said Russo. And so the question is, what was the control on that study that showed so much pesticide in there? Did that pesticide come from marijuana growers, or was it there from previous use of the industry generally for agricultural use? You know, as Travis illuminated too, that some of those pesticides that we use in agricultural use have been around for years. And my second question is for the new producers, producers of cannabis, should they be pre-testing their soil and water before they start their grow operations so that they can prove to regulatory officials what's there before they start it?
Both very good questions, and the latter I think is particularly pertinent in terms of industrial hemp growing because cannabis is a bioaccumulator. It's a phytoremedial plant. It could be used to clean up environmental poisons because it sucks it up from the soil. So if you have so soil testing is a really good idea, I would say. In terms of the first question about, it really raises the issue of how accurate the test results are. I mean, the problem with testing for poisons you're only so good as the testing equipment or as sophisticated the testing equipment is, and you can get false positives for lots of things. You can be testing a little bit of a residue from your previous test if you're not cleaning it up properly. So I don't want to overstate the significance of one set of numbers, but we're seeing it across the board, a problem here. How big a problem, if it's huge or just or mega monumental or just very serious, I don't know, but it seems it's a real issue that has to be dealt with.
And anecdotally, I can say for sure that it's like, I know a lot of growers, I've grown up with a lot of growers, I've used some of these pesticides myself when I was younger and didn't know any better. It is a massive, massive, massive problem. It is used widely all up and down the West Coast with people just not knowing that it's not okay. It used to be you couldn't get information about it, and so you walked into a hydroponic store and said, I got bugs, and they gave you whatever the most expensive thing on the shelf was. It's systemic. It's been built into the illegal industry from the very beginning, and it's one of the biggest challenges that we face going forward as far as method, because there are ways to control pests, but it involves IPM, which is a whole integrated program. And if you're not willing to take those steps, you end up with either crop failure or poison, and that's it.
It's very succinct.
Okay, go ahead.
I've got a question for AC. I was recently pitched on supercritical CO2 extraction equipment that was based not on recycling the CO2, but actually just flushing it every time. Claim was that it was lower capital cost, much lower maintenance cost, you know, cheaper to run. And I'm just wondering if you've seen a lot of that out there. I mean, obviously, it's horrible for the environment, but just whether that's an issue that you've seen out in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think they were just trying to sell you their version of CO2 system because the way CO2 or any solvent works, and we have a closed loop system, so it recycles the CO2 through. And just like any solvent, it's most effective actually on the second and third runs, because then a like starts attracting like, and you've got a solvent entrained, you've got a material entrained in the solvent, and so it becomes an even better solvent after the second or third time. And then after a while it becomes material laden, and then then it's not as effective. So we usually tell people run through the system three to five times. There is a old school theory that you should just blow off the CO2 every time, and especially in an industrial level, that might be true, but actually we're working on, with a huge hops plant down in Washington, a way to clean the CO2 and recycle it back in. I mean, CO2 is not very expensive, and it's certainly not dangerous to the environment, but yeah, that's my answer.
Well, I just want to say to the gentleman who just asked that question, CO2, it is a greenhouse gas. So venting each time as opposed to recycling 3 to 5 times, it's easy math, reuse.
Okay. My name's, my question's for Travis. Have you thought about creating your own label of certified organic grown hemp? Because I'm coming from the culinary industry, and I've been a big supporter and advocate for organic produce, and we have a catering company, and that's what we do. And I know that there's not very much trust in the government labeling and the processes with involvement in money. And we're a logical community, and we know when a real label is honest. And if you've thought about creating your own set of standard rules, and even go far as starting schools or classes for up and coming craft growers, so they can learn from the beginning how to create cannabis and a product with the right intent at the end for the customer.
Absolutely. It's definitely something that we've been talking about. I work very closely with the Cannabis Growers of Canada. I'm the Vancouver Island rep for them. It's something, these standards that we need to set, that include everything from analytical testing for pesticides to grow methods to transparent, like letting people see the inside of a grow operation, are all very, very key. The biggest problem with the organic side of things right now is, for one, in Canada, organic certification actually isn't really on point in the first place. If you come from the food industry, you already know that. The second thing about it is you can't really get any kind of accreditation without government support. Yep. So it makes it very hard for us to get any kind of organic accreditation. Now, the way I grow is, like I say, I don't even use fertilizer. Yeah. Like, it's all in the dirt. To me, that's what organic is. To me, it's like as soon as you're pouring something out of a bottle, it's like you're kind of losing grasp on what organic is. Whereas organic standards across like widespread agriculture are a little bit different than that. Like, you can use liquid nutrients and still call them organic in agriculture.
Would you ever consider taking the government certification and literally just do it online, where people know you as a respected individual, independent, and then disregard and just copyright a symbol that you would put on other products and your own?
We have had that conversation. It's a big project, though, because you have to set certain limits and thresholds, and you need to do a lot of scientific work in order to figure out where you should set those. And similar to like how craft beer evolved in the States with the craft beer industry there, they created a board for craft beer that was centered on the West Coast. And the people that founded that board started to grow to a point where they were bigger than the things that were established for craft. We're gonna see the same sort of thing happen with organics. It's like, who wants to grow 7,000 acres of organics? How are they gonna do it? It's a very different thing than establishing sort of a craft way of production. Which I think will be a little easier for us to do in the short term. Sort of establish craft standards that involve using certain types of methods and stuff like that. I think that'll be an easier thing for us to do in the short term. But absolutely, I can't wait for the day when there's some sort of a board, maybe with me on it, that is certifying organic cannabis.
And with that, I want to thank our panel.
British Columbia, home to the most beautiful landscapes in the world. Home to mom and pop vineyards, hot springs, farmers markets, some of the world's best skiing, snowboarding, surfing, and mountain biking. We protect our rainforests and keep our air clean. BC, we strike the right balance between nature and nurture. But did you know that for the last 30 years, BC has also been home to the finest cannabis in the world? BC Bud is world-renowned for its taste, aroma, and potency. We've competed and won cups, gained recognition from international celebrities. We are the Cannabis Growers of Canada. We create wealth, opportunity, and good-paying private sector jobs. The BC cannabis crop is worth over $7 billion a year, and there were over 17,000 farms creating work for Canadians and improving the lives of millions of people. We are joining together to build a free and fair cannabis market that benefits all Canadians. Won't you come and join us at cannagrowers.ca?